So if you're in Eastern European corporate culture, silence during an interview is basically an emergency.
Oh, absolutely. It's terrifying.
Right. It is this terrifying void, and you feel this overwhelming urge to just fill it immediately, just so the recruiter doesn't assume you are entirely incompetent.
Yeah, you just start talking to prove you're still there.
Exactly. But if you take that exact same mindset into an interview in, say, Silicon Valley or London, you are playing a completely different game, and you've got the wrong rule book. Because in Western corporate hubs, silence is not a weakness at all. It is a weapon.
I love that. A weapon.
Yeah, a deliberate pause is treated as, like, proof of maturity. So today we are diving deep into why mastering the international job interview isn't really about having perfect grammar, but about, well, unlearning almost everything you know about communication. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone.
Thanks for having me. And yeah, we are looking at this really fascinating intersection of linguistics, psychology, and corporate strategy today. I mean, if you are a Russian-speaking professional, or really any international candidate trying to break into the global business stage, the technical skills on your resume are already a given.
Right. They know you can do the math or write the code.
Exactly. You wouldn't even be in the room if you didn't have those skills.
Well,
So the barrier to entry at these top-tier global firms is entirely cultural. It's about how you know, frame your agency, how you navigate pressure, and how you translate your professional identity into a very specific type of corporate English.
totally. And to figure out how to do that, we are analyzing some amazing materials today. We've got the corporate narrative, stellar professionalism, and mastering elite professional idioms. Plus, we have this highly revealing case study of an interview coaching session between an HR expert named Olga and a candidate named Ivan.
That case study is just gold.
It really is. And what becomes immediately apparent when looking at Ivan's struggles is this phenomenon of linguistic interference. Like, it's not that he doesn't know the English words, right?
No, his vocabulary is fine.
Yeah, it's that his native syntax and his cultural conversational habits are, well, they're actively sabotaging his delivery.
Yeah, Ivan actually provides a perfect baseline for this whole discussion. At one point in the coaching session, the pressure of translating his thoughts in real time
Yeah.
just causes him to freeze up entirely.
That's so relatable.
It really is. He admits to his coach, he just says, I am a mess. I know my field, but in English, my brain completely stops.
Okay, let's unpack this because this I'm a mess mentality is incredibly common.
Oh, yeah.
So common. And the phrase itself, to mess something up, meaning to ruin something or make a huge mistake, it's universally used to admit nerves or signal that you are, dropping the ball. But structurally, what Ivan is doing here is stepping into a highly defensive linguistic posture.
Right, he's apologizing for himself.
Exactly. He is treating the English language like a high school exam where any grammatical slip-up is an absolute failure rather than, a tool he is wielding to negotiate his value.
And that defensive posture is the very first thing that has to be dismantled. I mean, Western human resources at companies like Amazon, Google, or big international finance firms, they have largely abandoned that traditional checkbox style of interviewing.
Thank goodness for that.
Yeah, right. But it means they operate on these behavioral interviewing frameworks, which the literature refers to as the narrative interview.
Narrative interview. Okay, break that down for us.
So they assume your technical competencies are sound. What's fascinating here is that what they are actually probing for is risk management, emotional intelligence, and your capacity to navigate ambiguity. They aren't looking for a list. They're listening for a narrative.
Which requires a massive structural shift in how you answer questions. I mean, if you were terrified of making a mistake, you just default to reciting a technical manual,
That's
right?
exactly. You just read the bullet points.
Right. You list your duties chronologically because it feels safe. But a narrative requires a protagonist. It requires tension and, resolution. It is the difference between reading a stereo manual and directing a gripping movie trailer about your own career. You are the star of that trailer.
That's a great analogy. And the classic Western framework for this movie trailer, which directly addresses the narrative interview concept from our materials, is the STAR method. So that's situation, task, action, result.
Right. STAR. We hear that acronym everywhere.
You do. But it's an excellent lens for this, particularly when we look at how Slavic linguistic tendencies map onto English. In Russian and many Eastern European languages, there's this natural, very elegant tendency to use passive or reflexive constructions.
Right. The language itself kind of decenters the individual.
Precisely. It is culturally appropriate to emphasize the collective process or the environment over the individual ego.
Hmm.
So when candidates translate this mindset directly into English, they heavily over-index on the situation and the task.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, they will spend 5 minutes describing the background of the project and the duties that were assigned to the team.
Leaving almost no oxygen for the action and the result, they bury the lead completely.
Exactly.
So the Western recruiter is just sitting there waiting for the protagonist to actually do something, and the candidate is just describing the scenery.
Describing the scenery, yeah, that is exactly what it is. To succeed in a narrative interview, you have to invert that structure. The situation and task should take up maybe 20% of your answer, max.
Wow, only 20%.
Yeah. The overwhelming focus must be on the specific action you took and the quantifiable result you drove. You have to consciously override that cultural instinct to be humble or process-oriented, and you have to step into the center of the narrative as the active agent.
But okay, a strategic narrative only really works if you don't look completely terrified while you're delivering it.
Fair point.
Which brings us back to what we mentioned at the start, the panic of the pause. Let's say you are executing your STAR method answer beautifully, and then the recruiter throws a massive plot twist at you. They ask a highly specific, complex behavioral question that you just did not anticipate. Your narrative is suddenly disrupted.
And this is where the cultural perception of silence creates a massive trap. As you mentioned earlier, the internal alarm bells just start ringing.
Oh, yeah. Red alert.
The instinct is to rush to fill that void, which often results in a stream of umses or just a chaotic, unstructured answer that totally derails the entire narrative you just built.
Because in that split second, the candidate assumes the interviewer is judging their speed of recall, like it's a quiz show.
Right, like they need to hit the buzzer first.
Exactly. But the materials point out that Western corporate culture interprets a thoughtful pause before answering a complex question as a sign of analytical depth. It proves you aren't just reacting impulsively, right? You are calibrating a strategic response.
Yes. But to do that without looking like you just forgot your own name, you need to implement a linguistic buffer. You need a phrase that signals to the interviewer that you have heard the question, you respect its complexity, and you are taking a moment to synthesize your thoughts.
So we're talking about the idiom buy time.
Yes, to buy time, meaning to win a brief moment to formulate your thoughts or delay an answer.
Huh.
And the tactical execution of buying time relies on what our sources call conversational greasers.
Conversational greasers. I love that term. And in the coaching dialogue we looked at, Olga actually gives Ivan a specific conversational greaser to deploy when he gets hit with a curveball. She tells him to physically lean back, hold eye contact, and say, "That's a stellar question."
It is a really fascinating choice of vocabulary. I mean, assuming our listeners are highly proficient in English, they obviously know what the word stellar means.
Right. Star-like, outstanding, exceptionally good.
Exactly. Top tier. But functionally, in the context of an interview, it acts as this sophisticated anchor.
But wait, let me push back on this tactic for a second. Because if I am applying for a highly technical role, say I'm interviewing for a senior data scientist position, and the recruiter asks me a really straightforward question about a specific Python library, and I lean back, rub my chin, and say, "That is a stellar question," before answering, I am going to look ridiculous, right?
Oh, completely.
Doesn't this conversational greaser tactic completely backfire if it's overused or misapplied?
It absolutely backfires if it isn't calibrated to the complexity of the question. You've identified the exact boundary of the tactic right there.
Okay, so there are rules.
Yes, conversational greasers are not for basic recall or binary technical questions. If they ask you what programming language you prefer and you try to buy time, you just look incompetent.
Right, you should just know that.
Exactly. You deploy that as a stellar question. When you are asked to synthesize information, resolve a hypothetical conflict, or, say, scale an architecture. It is a tool for managing complexity, not for masking ignorance.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. It's really about matching the linguistic tool to the cognitive load of the question. It's kind of like watching a chess grandmaster.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, like when an opponent plays a standard, predictable opening, the grandmaster moves instantly. But when the opponent introduces a novel, really complex trap, the grandmaster doesn't violently twitch and grab a piece in a panic.
No, they don't.
They take a deliberate breath, they analyze the board, and taking that second makes them look entirely in control, not confused.
And the phrase itself, using stellar, achieves something structural that a basic word like good just does not. If you say, "That is a good question," it lacks professional weight. Upgrading to stellar signals a mastery of corporate vernacular.
It sounds more executive.
It really does. It
Right.
subtly positions you as a peer who is evaluating the interviewer's question rather than a subordinate who is desperately seeking their approval.
Yeah.
It equalizes the power dynamic in the room.
That is a brilliant nuance. Okay, let's shift gears to the actual delivery of the answer once that time is successfully bought. We've established the narrative structure and the pause, but the underlying vocabulary still needs to align with this active protagonist mindset.
Right.
And the overarching concept the materials focus on here is bringing your A game, which, for our listeners, means operating at the absolute elite level of your professional capacity, performing at your best.
Yes, to bring your A game. And to bring your A game linguistically, you have to completely eradicate passive, task-based language from your vocabulary. We touched on this with the STAR method, but the semantic differences are profound.
How so?
Well, when an international candidate relies on phrases like, I worked on the marketing project, or my duty was to oversee the software update, they are fundamentally misunderstanding what Western companies are actually buying.
But why is I worked on so detrimental? I mean, it's grammatically correct. It describes the reality of the office, doesn't it?
It's detrimental because it frames you as a deployed resource. Think about it. I worked on implies that someone else created the strategy, someone else built the framework, and you simply provided the manual labor or the time.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, it is the language of a renter, not an owner. Western corporate culture is ruthlessly results-oriented. They are listening for agency.
So when you change I worked on to I delivered, or you change my duty was to I achieved, you are no longer framing yourself as a resource. You are framing yourself as an autonomous agent who generates actual value.
Exactly.
Because the company isn't paying for the hours you spent sitting at a desk drinking coffee.
Yeah.
They are paying for the 20% increase in sales you delivered or the faster processing time you achieved.
And this maps perfectly onto the most ubiquitous buzzword in international business today, which is proactive.
Oh, proactive. You see that on literally every job description.
Every single one, every global company claims to want proactive employees. But understanding what that word actually demands structurally in an interview is where most candidates fail.
Right, because everyone knows the dictionary definition of proactive. It means creating or controlling a situation rather than just reacting to it after the fact. But you can't just walk into an interview and proudly announce, I am a very proactive person.
No, you definitely can't.
It's an empty claim. So how do you structurally implement a proactive framework into your English?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you do it by structuring your sentences so that you are the active subject of a transformative verb.
Okay, give me an example.
Instead of describing a problem that happened to your team and how you eventually fixed it, you frame it around anticipation. You say, I identified a vulnerability in our supply chain, and I initiated a new protocol before the bottleneck could impact Q3 revenue.
Oh, that sounds so much better.
Right. You are demonstrating that you do not require a crisis to take action. You are managing the horizon.
It really is about claiming absolute agency. And this actually brings us to a fascinating resolution in the case study with Ivan and his coach, Olga.
I love this part.
Yeah, after working through this entire psychological and linguistic dismantling, moving from the defensive I'm a mess posture, learning to pause with conversational greasers like stellar, and adopting an autonomous, results-oriented vocabulary, Ivan finally synthesizes the whole concept.
The light bulb goes on.
Exactly. He tells her, so I just need to be more proactive and deliver under pressure.
He essentially articulates the core thesis of Western corporate expectations in one single sentence.
He nails it. And the way Olga responds is structurally very interesting. She doesn't just say, you are correct or that is right. She uses the phrase spot on.
Spot on. It's an incredibly useful phrase to integrate into your corporate vocabulary. While it literally translates to completely correct or perfectly accurate, its function in a conversation is much more nuanced than that.
Yeah, I hear spot on constantly in British and American corporate circles. But why does it land so much better than just saying, you are correct?
It comes down to the tone of validation. When you tell someone you are correct, it carries a slight, pedagogical tone.
Like a teacher grading a student.
Exactly. It reinforces a hierarchy. Spot on, however, functions as peer-to-peer validation. It carries this inherent enthusiasm. When a colleague or an interviewer makes a great point and you respond with, that is spot on, You are aligning yourself with their insight.
You're putting yourself on their level.
Yes, you are validating their intelligence while simultaneously positioning yourself as an equal.
It builds immediate rapport. So looking at this entirely new linguistic toolkit we've unpacked today, what we're really talking about is a profound psychological pivot.
It really is.
We started by acknowledging that translating your resume into English isn't enough. You have to translate your identity. And you, the listener, you now have tools to avoid that messing up mentality. You can step into your corporate narrative.
You are systematically stripping away the linguistic habits that make you sound passive, hesitant, or reactive.
Right.
You are unlearning the instinct to apologize for your English, and instead, you are utilizing strategic pauses to manage complexity. You're buying time with stellar filler phrases. You're abandoning the language of process for the language of results.
You are leaving the "I worked on" mindset behind and embracing the "I delivered" reality. You are acting as the protagonist of your own career narrative, taking ownership of your achievements, and proving that you can anticipate challenges before they arise. You are bringing your A game.
Analyzing these shifts brings up an incredibly compelling application of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis.
Oh, linguistic relativity. That is a fascinating angle.
It is. It's the idea that the structure of a language shapes the speaker's worldview and cognition. So if you are an international professional and you consciously force yourself to stop using passive constructions, if you deliberately adopt this highly confident, autonomous, results-oriented English vocabulary every single day in your communications, does it actually start to change your core psychological identity as a professional?
Wow. You literally rewire your brain to view yourself differently.
Exactly.
Because by constantly framing yourself as the active agent who delivers and achieves, rather than the passive participant who just works on things, you kind of can't help but internalize that agency.
You start believing it.
You stop waiting for permission to lead, because the very language you are speaking demands that you take ownership.
The language is no longer just a tool for the interview. It becomes the architecture for your ongoing professional development.
That is a profound realization to end on. Mastering a new business language might just be the exact mechanism required to master a completely new, elevated version of yourself. You aren't just memorizing definitions, you are stepping into a different mode of thinking. So think about that the next time you sit down to prepare for a global interview. You are not a deployed resource. You are the protagonist. Go deliver the narrative. Until next time, keep diving deep.